Well, thank you all for joining us today. This is our third series, our third installment of the IndigoEdge series. And today, as you know, we are focusing on digital die cutting um, versus traditional die cutting. We'll talk a little bit about that in the beginning of the presentation and maybe a little bit more at the end about traditional die cutting. Um, and just a couple of housekeeping things. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. If you have questions, you can either post it in the chat whenever the question pops into your head, or you can save it for the end and ask it at the Q&A session. We're cool either way. And those of you who signed up early enough should have received a packet in the mail that included some samples. And the samples, if you look on the back, they're numbered and they also have a QR code. We'll refer to these samples throughout the presentation. And if you're curious to see how the file's set up, you can scan the QR code. It'll take you to our website and you can download the file that we use for production. And if we did everything right, the files would be exactly how we want you to send them to us. So these are good guides when you're doing your own setup to look at, and you can pick these apart and you know exactly how files are set up.
Matt, can you hold them up higher so you can see them?
Yep, sorry. So here's one, here's another, like on the back, there's a QR code.
And the other two?
Yeah, finding them here. Also, I want to thank our designer, Pete Birch, for doing such an amazing job on all of these pieces. And Liz Richardson also collaborating so much and so many days with Pete and Raquel on this one for getting these files together. It was, I know it's always a lot of work, but thank you all for doing that. Okay, so today Raquel is going to be doing the presentation. Raquel is the person in the shop who does the majority of our digital die cutting. She also runs our two envelope machines. There's kind of two divisions that keeps her very busy throughout the day. And all of these machines very close, so you can see her running back and forth all day long between these three machines. So Raquel, do you want to start off and
Yeah, sure. All right, everyone can hear me, right? My mic's working. It's working all right.
I can hear you great.
Okay, cool. Yep. Like Matt said, my name is Raquel, and I'm a production assistant here at Indigo Ink. I run the digital die cutter. It is a flatbed Synajet. I might accidentally call it a Synajet just because that's what we affectionately call it here at the shop, but it is our digital die cutter, so that's what I'm talking about. I have a PowerPoint presentation set up, so I will go ahead and start screen sharing that. Like Matt said, gather your samples if you've signed up in time so that you can see what I'm referring to as I go throughout the presentation. So one second, pull up my PowerPoint. Okay. So today we're talking about digital die cutting and how we set up our files and like go about that process here at Indigo Ink. So what is die cutting? In the traditional sense, it is a physical metal die. It's kind of like a cookie cutter, but for things that aren't dough. We have two examples of them here. On this side, we have angled cuts for business cards. It's just so that you get a really consistent cut, like angle every single time for hundreds of business cards. We are able to achieve that on our like guillotine cutter, like just cutting them by hand. But when you have a die, you'll know that it's going to be the same angle every single time, thousands of times. So even if it's a run of 50 business cards or 5,000 business cards, that angle will be machine perfect every time. Same thing with our die that we have here on the right. These are three circles side by side so that you can punch out three circles at the same time. And they'll be the same size, perfect every single time. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we are talking about digital die cutting and what that looks like here. So this is our flatbed die cutter. It's manufactured by a company called Synajet, and it is technically called a graphic wizard. But like I said, I refer to it as the Synajet. That's how we call it here. So It's a pretty big machine. It can run hundreds of sheets for hours. It's pretty well automated. The way it works is that we have a arm that will grab the sheet. Oh, it's laggy. I
It'll
don't know
probably
if it's
catch up.
playing all the way for you guys. If it's not, I'm sorry, but it's an arm that has suction cups that grab the sheet and it pulls them onto the wool conveyor belt. From there, it will use one of 3 different tools that we have to create the shape. We have a die cutting tool, a kiss cutting tool, and a scoring tool. In this video featured, it's using the kiss cutting blade. The kiss cutting and die cutting blades are relatively the same, like essentially the same, but the kiss cutting blade doesn't push down into the paper as much. So it's just peeling, like it's just cutting mostly for label stock. It's just cutting enough so that you can peel a label away from a backer. In your sample 3, that sticker, that is a method that is used there. It's die cutting and kiss cutting. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you can see here that all of the stickers are still stuck to the sheet and I can just peel them away. I don't know if it's playing. I can't tell if it's playing all the way for you guys. Is it?
It's
No.
playing a couple seconds and then it stops.
Can we blame it on AT&T and them being down today?
We can blame it on AT&T.
All right, let's just do that. That's probably not the problem, but
But you see,
there
you
you
go.
I see it. Good
It's
job.
it peels off, but like the sheet itself is complete and you just peel the sticker off of the sheet. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of videos here, so we shouldn't have to worry about this too much. All right. There we go. So this method of die cutting, digital die cutting, is really, really cost effective. I don't know how familiar a lot of you are with traditional die cutting, but it can be relatively expensive to create a die. When you think about the fact that this die is going to be used hundreds, thousands of times, the cost is like pretty reasonable. But when you want a really small run of something unique, like maybe only 100 invitations that are shaped like Michigan, or fancy frames for 8 different menu options for a wedding, or you only need 16 table numbers shaped like seashells, you don't want to have to worry about the cost and the time that it takes to make a traditional die. So the digital die cutting option is really, really, really cost effective and saves a lot of time, and it might be a better option for your project. So now I'm going to swing into the file setup portion of my presentation. I won't be setting anything up from scratch. I'll be referencing, I don't know if you all can see me, but like the samples that we showed you guys earlier, the like poster, the sticker, the card, and the pyramid packaging. So let me just switch over to that. There we go. So we're going to start here with our first example, the coaster. So like Matt said, if you guys registered by last week, you will have received a sample pack with like our catalog, a few die cut samples, and that's what I'll be talking about today. So for this right now, we're going to be looking at the coaster file, and right off the bat, something that I would notice that if I was looking at this file and wanted to make sure that this was correct, I'm noticing that the die line and the art are not aligned. Oh, perfect. You guys were in my way and then you snapped to the bottom. That's great. So the art and the die line are not aligned. If you are going for something like this, where it's skewed to the left or right, like aligned left or right, that's perfectly fine. But if we saw this, just because it's a little atypical, we would probably reach out to you and ask. If you weren't sure how to correct it, you could go in and select all of your art pieces, either by hitting Shift and then selecting each piece individually, or from your layers panel, selecting it like this, still holding Shift, and then Control Group, and now they're all grouped together. This still technically isn't correct. What I will first do before I continue editing the rest of this file is I will create a new layer so that I can put the die line in its own layer. We do that so that when we're going in and creating the separate die line for the machine and then the art file for what's getting printed, it's easy to just turn off layers and we don't have to worry about separate files or mixing anything up. I'm noticing that the die line has a fill, so we don't want that. We're going to get rid of the fill, and it's also cyan. And it doesn't really matter what color your die line is if it's the only line in your file. But we prefer that you would set up your die lines as 100% magenta. That way there's a lot of contrast between the art and the line, and we can at first glance look at it and be like, okay, that's definitely the die line. So now that everything here is set up pretty okay, we'll select everything. I just click and drag, and then I can use the align tool to align everything horizontal center. Easy peasy. It's going to align to the artboard in this way. If you select, if you have everything selected and then pick like your art, if you select your art a second time and then hit the, it'll align to the art as opposed to the artboard. It just depends on what you're going for, which technique you'll use. But for the sake of this, you're just going to align it to the artboard. So that's our coaster. That's file set up for that. I'll show you guys how we achieved this look with the greeting card, that knockout. This is actually really, really simple, but it's so like eye-catching and powerful. And it's a really simple way. It's a really simple process of setting that up. I'll just create a new artboard here. And I'll take my type tool. And I'm just going to use my name because that's easy. And I'm going to pick a different font because I don't like Myriad Pro. We'll do this one. So I'll make this a little bigger for you guys so you can see. And to make my text larger, I am using Control Shift and then the greater than. Yeah, the Control Shift greater than, and I'm just hitting greater than to make it larger. Of course, you can also just do one of these, but I know that I still need it to be a little larger. So Control Shift greater than, and that will increase the size of your text. So now that we're here, I'm going to go into my select tool and make sure that my text box is selected, not the like text itself, just the text box. Go to type, and then create outlines. You can do type create outlines or Shift Control O. And then from there, I'll do the outlines. So here, this is a wonky font, and so everything is in pieces, but that's okay. I will ungroup everything. And actually, what I'll do, first I'm gonna Control X to cut everything and put it into a new layer, just so that I don't have to worry about it editing other things. And then I'll paste it. So now that everything is ungrouped, I will select the shapes that I want to merge together, and I will use my Pathfinder tool to unite the shapes. And it's the first. If your Pathfinder tool isn't like just readily here, you go to Window and then Pathfinder. And I like to keep mine just on my toolbar because I use it so often. But here, so we'll merge all of our shapes together using the Unite tool. And now they're all their own shape. This outline technically is a die line. All you would have to really do is maybe adjust your kerning and change your stroke from whatever color it was to 100% magenta. And the weight of the stroke doesn't really matter. It could be 1, it could be 0.7, 0.5, 0.75, it could be 3. The software that we use for our Signajet is just like it only reads the stroke and the color. It doesn't really care what the weight is. Of course, when you're going for a text knockout that's getting die cut, you'd have to be mindful of the eyes of your letters. So those are things that you would just like direct select. The hotkey for that is A, and then delete them out. Because those are elements that would just fall out of your art when it gets die cut. So it would look a little bit like this. So that's how we achieved our classy greeting card. Moving on to sample 3, which is our monster sticker. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a combination of die cutting and kiss cutting. So this is our die line, and this is our kiss line. Here in this file, everything is already in different layers, so that's correct. And you'll notice that our die line and our kiss line are different colors. For our software, they have to be different colors so that I can assign tasks to each color. That's why it doesn't really matter what colors they are, but it's easy for us to look at and know, like, okay, that's definitely the die line and that's definitely the kiss line. For the sake of this presentation, I'm gonna make our kiss line yellow, 100% yellow. And so now we know that these are two different tasks that are going to be assigned to this. I will show you how we make our die, like how I would like to make a die line. If I was trying to achieve something that is die cut and kiss cut, I'll hide the die line for now so that I can just show you. And I think I'll actually leave the cyan so it's a little easier to see. Or maybe even green. That's fine. So I'm going to lock my art layer so that I don't accidentally edit it. And from the kiss line here, I'm going to copy it, make a new layer, and paste in place. And then I'm going to hide the kiss line for now. Just, yeah, that didn't work. Just to make sure it works. That's why I hide it. So I accidentally direct selected. Now I have the full select, copy, paste in place, lock the kiss layer, hide it. And I know that I have a second separate line from my kiss line. And I'll rename this to okay, so to make a die line for stickers where you want the silhouette to still kind of match your art, the way I do it is I'll have my kiss line already set up and I will increase the stroke by like maybe to 12 points. And then I'll make sure that I have the stroke aligned not to the center, but to the outside. And you see how it already is starting to look like our die line. But we're not done. So now I'm going to make the stroke. I'm going to outline it so that it becomes a shape of its own. And I'm going to use my direct select tool to select the inside stroke and delete it. I have to hit delete twice so that I don't just delete the little portion. And then I will swap the fill for the stroke. And now it looks a lot like our other die line. And then of course I would change the color to magenta so that we know that this is the die line and this is the kiss line. The reason that I add so much of a stroke weight from that initial kiss line to make it to the die line is because it's optimal to have 1/8 of an inch between your die line and kiss line. If it's less than that, you start to get like the very edges of your sticker that is like the dead space will start to peel up off of the backer and it can get a little messy and sticky, and that's not what you're looking for when you're trying to do die cut stickers. So when there's more than 1/8 of an inch, you can be pretty confident that it's going to stay to the backer and that the blade isn't going to just peel up the edges. We're not going to measure it if it's not like to see if it's 1/8 of an inch. That's not something that we'll like send it back to you if we think it's maybe less. If it's working on the die cutter, then we're like safely assume that it's more than 1/8 of an inch. But like because I think what you guys have is probably a little bit more. So more is always better, but at least 1/8 of an inch is best. Okay. So we're going to move on from our sticker. And now I'll point your attention to the package, the triangle package. So this file is set up pretty perfectly. The only thing that I'm pointing out here, well, there's a couple of things that I'm going to point out with this. Like I said, everything here is perfect. The artwork and the score and the die lines are all separate. And it's easy to turn off different layers and to like hide things so you can see what you're looking at. For now, I'm going to leave the art hidden so that I can zoom into the die line and point out that the points here are not perfect points. So For the digital die cutter, like I mentioned, it's a blade. They're tiny little blades that swivel 360 degrees, and they need room to turn when they're cutting out your art. Some of you, for those of you who do have the samples, if you haven't already folded it together into the box or into the pyramid, I would encourage you to maybe take a look at the edges, how the points on the little tabs are still very sharp, like they still look like a really crisp corner, even though this is taken in 0.03 inches. It's very, very slight. It's super subtle. You can't ever tell when we finally go to make the final product, but it makes a huge difference. When this was a perfect point and there was no rounded corner, it was snagging on a lot of the edges and ruining a bunch of our pyramids. So that's a technique that in die cutting in general, when you know it's going to, like whether it's a flatbed or even your Cricut cutter, if you're noticing that it's snagging on your edges, like those corners, I would tuck it in just 0.03 inches and your blade will have a lot, like it's a lot more room to turn and you'll end up with really crisp corners. So that is something that we recommend when you're setting up your file for yourself, or that might be something that we'll adjust ourselves if we like have permission from you if you don't know how to do it. But I will say that if it's really time consuming to edit your die line, we'll probably end up having to charge you a design fee. So that's why we're showing you so that you're able to do it by yourself for free. And one more thing in file setup. We're gonna go back. So I hid the art layer so that you could see the die lines better. But some of you may notice, like as I hover around here, there are all these little anchor points and paths that it picks up. That's because the art is being clipping masked. And that's good. We like clipping masks when we're designing things because it's a non-destructive way of editing. And when it's going to print, that's perfectly fine. We know that the printer is not going to see through the clipping mask and it's only going to print the visible art. But for the die line, you'll notice that the die line does not have clipping masks. And if you want to be sure that your die line doesn't have clipping masks, hit Control Y and you'll see everything in outline view. And this is actually, I needed to put this in my artboard layer, but that's okay. That's just covering up a little line of text. We're going to ignore it for now. So in Control Y, that's outline view.
I was going to say that's a good example of checking, because that would
yeah, that's a really good example of checking. That line was technically in my die line file or die line, I think score line. I think it was in the score line layer, which I don't think it would matter because it didn't have a color assigned to it, but sometimes it does. Like that's what I mean. Like going through your clipping masks, but so Control Y, we see only I'm going to hide the scores. So this is just the die line and these are just the score lines. And I'll even show you the art. This is what's hiding under the clipping masks in the art files. If any of these were used, like if the clipping mask had been used to cut out parts for the die line, our Signajet will see through the clipping mask and it will try to cut out all of those little shapes and it's awful. So when you're editing your die lines or your score lines, your kiss lines, all of that, make sure that you're just drawing it in and it's just a stroke. You cannot use a clipping mask to edit things out. It sees through your clipping masks. So that's fine for your art files, but it is not fine for your die lines. Yeah. And I would say that concludes the Illustrator portion of this.
Raquel, I have a question.
Sure.
When we didn't cover like how to draw a die line, the circle is kind of easy. Do you want to hit on that real quick? Like if there could be people out there that don't know how to draw a die line.
Sure. I'll use this as a little example. Let me see. I'll delete this for now. We don't need it. So I would not recommend trying to hand draw. If you're doing a die line and a kiss line, I would recommend first doing your kiss line and then using the increasing stroke method to create your die line, because it makes it makes softer edges and it's easier for a die cutter to cut out your shape. You'll notice that because I use the puffy stroke, it's like just the silhouette, like the essence of our monster shape. It's not a perfect outline. That's great because it has softer edges to cut around and you don't have to worry about it snagging. And it ultimately doesn't matter because that's the part that's getting thrown away. Like the kiss line can get really, really detailed, and then you'll have your really fun die cut shape for your like custom shape for your sticker. But I'll show you how to do how like kind of the correct way. I will say that this is the correct way that you should be drawing shapes in Illustrator is using your pen tool. So I will actually hide and I'll draw it from the kiss line. So this is our kiss line. And a lot of beginners in Illustrator, I'll notice, will use the paintbrush tool to draw things, which isn't awful because it is still a stroke that you can edit, but it's not for like coloring. It would be for like editing your stroke like this with your anchor points. You can't really use it to color things. So maybe you can use your paintbrush tool. I infinitely prefer the pen tool because I'm able to hit a point, click, hold, and drag. And now you have like a really smooth shape. And if you're going for something like super duper simple, like you don't even really care if it gets the little feet here, you can just kind of click and drag, and that's how you adjust your curves. We'll bring it over here. I probably need a few more anchor points, but that's okay. If I want to add another anchor point, I hit the plus tool and I can add an anchor point in my line, go back into my direct select, and you can edit it out there. So
Thanks for
when you're
showing that.
drawing your excuse me. When you're drawing your die line, I would recommend using the pen tool. Because then you're able to edit your curves and your angles a lot more. Should have brought myself a couple. That's okay. If you're trying to like let's say I'll use a square for an example to show you guys how to edit the corners. You won't see it sometimes in your regular select tool, but for sure you'll notice it with the direct select tool. But I'll use it from the fully select. So I have my full shape selected. You pull at the little target that's next to your corners and you can pull in. And when your entire shape is selected, it's going to adjust every single corner. What you can also do is double click. Maybe that's what it is. So in your directs, when you have it directly selected, you can double click that little target and it'll give you your corners panel and you can adjust a single corner at a time. And I could literally just put 0.03 inches. Make sure that your file is set to inches. Some of you may use points or picas, and I can't help you if you're using points or picas. I will simply change it to inches. But you go into your file document setup and you can make sure that your units are in inches. Sometimes it'll default to points. So just make sure that you're in inches. I don't know how many points it is for the corner round to get it to 0.03. But yeah. And you can pull it as much as you want, but that's also another really great way to edit shapes. So yeah. Like I said,
Raquel,
I think that's
I'm
about
just
it.
going to interject a couple questions that are in the chat before we get to the
Yes,
Q&A.
please. I can't see the chat when I'm in this screen, so
Yeah.
please.
So one question, once you have drawn the die line, is it okay to use that as a clipping mask?
I would say no clipping masks. Once you've drawn, like, use your die line as a clipping mask. For your art, it's okay. But like, so if you made your clipping mask the shape of your art and like now you've stamped out that color, I would say copy and paste that line and make it its own layer and its own shape now. Like if this happened to be your clipping mask for here but you had it in the same layer as your art, don't do that. I would say like copy it, paste it in a new layer, assign that as your die line or kiss line separate.
Thanks.
So you can
And
like
then,
recycle the line.
and then going back to when you were discussing the rounded corners about 5 minutes ago or so, there's a question, should the corners be rounded on knockout text as well?
Yes. Just a little bit. Like that 0.03, like it's very noticeable on the die line itself, but it's completely negligible here, like once it's produced and printed and cut out. Like that is how I adjust most die lines. If I'm noticing like corners are snagging or things are just being a total pain and I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's just ripping through sheets, I will literally just tuck in those corners just the tiny littlest bit, and it makes a world of difference. I almost want to go show some of you what like some of these looked like before I tucked in the corners. Like it would mangle. It was always the same one for some reason, but it would mangle this one. It would totally tear it. And I don't know why, because it would do all the rest of them fine. It's just about the blade having enough room to turn and just where that blade happens to be at that point. Like it's at this angle and like coming back over that curve. Yeah. Just even a little bit. It's yeah, for knockout text, yes. I think that's what we ended up doing for this one. I think he tucked in more. This looked like a lot more than 0.03. We had to try a couple different fonts to get it to be like really crispier. And we landed on this because it's cute and lovely. But yeah, I think even with the text, like the font that I showed you guys, I would have tucked in those corners a little bit.
And then let's jumping back to the clipping mask question. So there's a question, follow-up question. So the question is, so on the art layer in the AI file, it's fine, or would you have to export it out first?
Export it out. Like
Well, the art layer is fine. If it's on the art layer, it doesn't really matter if it's got a
yeah, the
clipping
art
mask.
layer is fine because I'll never see that when I'm die cutting. Like when so maybe I should have added an example of what it looks like, but um so we set up the final die line. So on our machine, you'll notice, hold on, I'll go back to my PowerPoint because you can see it, but it's still like it's a little am I able to just swap screens, slide control? How do I do this? I'm gonna stop screen sharing really quick and then I'm gonna bounce back to my PowerPoint. So in this PowerPoint, in the video that was like not playing, um, oh, go back. You'll notice these little registration marks. Percent from current slide. You'll notice these little dots here, those are the registration marks. And the file that the project manager set up and then hand off to me so that I can cut out the stickers or the packaging or whatever it is, it'll be on like a 8 by 18 by 12 sheet and it'll have 5 registration marks in the corners. You are not expected to set that up. We always do it. You literally just have to give us your art and the die line in one single file. What they then do will end up it and put it like 15 on a sheet, 2 on a sheet, 30 on a sheet, however many fit. And then what I see is a separate file with only those die lines or the and or kiss lines or score lines. I don't even like see the art. And what's interesting is the machine also does not care about what the art is. As long as the registration marks are where they're supposed to be, it's going to cut out whatever shape from the file it's being told to cut out. So it's not reading the art. It doesn't know that it's a heart there being printed, that she could be completely blank except for the registration marks, and it's going to cut out the heart every time because that's the file that I've uploaded. Same thing goes with like this packaging. Like the way that this was set up was 4 up, I think. So it was printed like 2 here, 2 here, and then the registration marks were all in place and it cut out every single letter on all 4, and then they got cut and scored like on another side of production. So your art and your die line are going to be on this in the same file, but they have to be on different layers in that file.
It's always a good reminder. Can I add one more thing, Raquel? Um,
Sure.
since you have this picture up and since you mentioned the registration marks, one of the really cool things about this digital die cutter is the fact that we are able to use these black registration marks. There's a camera in the head. If you look at the center picture, one of those tools is a camera, or maybe you can't really see
Yeah,
the
it's like
camera in
in
that tool.
there.
Yeah, it's in there. But there's a camera that looks for those 5 dots before it even starts die cutting. So in the first video, Raquel was showing you how the machine has an arm that will pull in the sheet for die cutting, but we can stack that up. We can have, 50, 100, 200 sheets in there. And each sheet that goes onto this belt could potentially go on at a slightly different angle, but every sheet gets re-scanned. The camera looks for those 5 registration marks, so that even if the sheet goes onto the machine skewed, even if it's like 15 degrees skewed, it'll still cut perfectly. So every sheet is perfectly registered. That's the beauty of this. It automatically corrects for anything that's off in feeding. Um,
Hmm.
and I'd say that's maybe the best feature of this machine, besides the fact that it's digital. You don't have to pay for a die, and we
Hmm.
can do it fast, super fast, in short runs.
Hmm.
But that's what
Yeah.
makes it all possible. We don't have to line up anything manually, which would be awful.
Yeah. But that's why we also ask that your die lines, your kiss lines, score lines, all that would be assigned like something within like CMYK, like magenta, cyan, or yellow, because the registration marks, when we print them, are always black. So, and when they set up the file digitally, they're always black. So if your score line was black, I tell the software that black means registration mark. So if your score line is black, it's not going to recognize that it needs to score there or to cut there.
Mm,
It's going to think it's a mark and try to read it. And that's not going to work because there's only 5 registration marks. So
hmm
that's why we asked that it's the color. Aside from the fact that like looking at it, then you can know, oh, this is not the art, this is the score line or the die line. It's also for the function of the software. So that we can't edit it. It's not something you'd be like, oh, it's wrong, sorry. We would fix it for you. But that is just another element of like setup.
Raquel, on that note, there was a question that came in. Do you prefer your die lines to be a spot color swatch or a process color swatch?
Oh, I forgot to mention this. So for those of you that watched the first 2 installments of Indigo Edge with the metallic ink and the white ink, over there, you gotta assign the color, like you gotta name the spot color, and it's gotta be have like a certain attribute and stuff. That does nope, you just literally go into your color picker and go magenta 100%. It
And
does
it could
not
be
have to be
process
named
color.
anything. Yeah, even your layers don't even have to be in a certain order. We just ask that everything's on a separate layer so that it's easy for us, like as humans, to visually see it. But computer wise, it does not matter. So easy peasy, just color pick to magenta or yellow or whatever color you want, really. But if you're going to use like green or something, you would at least please tell us, like, oh, the green line is the die line, and then we'll know, and then I'll just set it to that. But yep, no need for spot colors or any of that.
And are we officially into the Q&A part, or did you have any more
Oh,
to show us?
Raquel has more to show us before we move
All
into the
right.
official
Okay.
I've got a little bit more. Now that I've shown you how to set things up, we can kind of look at other fun stuff that we've done here um with our big old die cutter moment. So maybe we'll move forward.
And while Raquel's resetting herself up with her screen share, if in case I didn't say it in the beginning, I want to thank all of you for joining us and taking your time to learn about setting up files. Also, just a big thank you to every one of you who uses us for printing. We are immensely grateful and love seeing you on these webinars. It's really cool to have so many amazing customers who are willing to take time out of the day to listen to us talk a little bit about print.
Yes, thank you so
All right.
much. I love talking about this stuff. I know I feel a little scattered, but this is great. Okay.
No, you're doing
So
great.
moving into other fun things that this machine does. So of course we have plenty of paper stocks, and if you want to print with us, that's great. We love it. if you, for some reason, printed somewhere else or at your own home and you were like, oh, I just happen to also know how to set up all of your registration marks and everything because you've like worked with us a lot, and maybe like if you worked with Katie, one of her stationers, I'm sure knows how to set up our like how our die lines and stuff work. But usually we'd be printing here. But if you wanted also to provide your own paper, um, you can. We don't only just print on like our stocks. We will print on pretty much any paper as long as it's 11 by 17 to 13 by 19. Um, at least for like printing sake, and then die cutting. We won't do 8.5 by 11 because as you notice, like that arm has to pick up the sheet and then move it over. And then it gets, once it's on the belt, a fan turns on and that like vacuums the paper to the belt. So that's why it doesn't move. So all of that surface area is just, that's what's keeping it in place. The 8.5 by 11 sheets we've noticed, aside from the fact that it hates trying to feed it, I think it's just too short for the suction cups to be able to grab it. I'd one have to hand feed it, and two, it moves. There's not enough of a surface area for it to vacuum onto the belt, and just the movement of the blade is enough to move it out of place. And that's where you would end up with registration issues. Once it's found all 5 points, it's just going to cut. So it doesn't know if the paper's moved after that. If the paper moved after it already found the registration marks, it's just going to ruin the sheet. There's not a lot that we can do about it. I've tried. I wish it worked. It doesn't work. So we will not print, or we will not die cut 8.5 by 11 sheets. So if/when you provide your own paper, just make sure that it is 11 by 17 to 13 by 19. Also that it is cover weight. 100-pound cover weight is best. Heavier or is like the bare minimum. It's better for it to be a little heavier, but that is kind of like where we're like comfortable. Like, okay, it's definitely gonna look fine on 100-pound cover weight. Text weight paper is really prone to tearing for a similar reason. Like it just, if the blade snags a little bit, it's just gonna rip the sheet up. So you just go through a lot of paper, a lot of time. It's not optimal. Um, so I would just recommend it being over 100-pound cover weight.
Raquel, is there a maximum weight?
So I guess I've always made it cut. I've always figured out a way to get it to cut. We can cut on duplexed stock. That is a really fun thing about this machine. I just lower the blade a lot and it works. So duplex stock, but I think the heaviest we've duplexed it was with 120-pound. So it came out to 240-pound paper and that die cut. So I don't think we've ever duplexed like 140 together. I don't know if it would work. So 240, I would say, is maybe the max. Tentatively. Tentatively the max. We love to test things and we love to push the boundaries of our machines. But so confidently I can say 240 is like the max. But we, like I said, we can die cut duplex stock, which is also really good in the sense, oh no, I moved the head back. Which is also really nice because there are I know there are plenty of places that will not die cut on duplex stock. So that's just another fun thing that we offer. Also in the vein of just being prepared for anything, always provide your more than what you need. Your project manager will probably give you like an exact count of how many sheets that you would need for your job, and then also tell you to provide more paper. So it's like if your job needs 10 sheets to be like completed and get you to count on your order, but you can only buy the packs of paper in 25s or in 50s, just buy the 25 or the 50, send it to us. We will send you your paper back. You're not going to hold on to it. You're not going to lose out on paper. Always send extra, even if it's a lot extra, because that's all you could get your hands on. That's fine. We're going to use what we needed to use and we're going to send everything back to you. We're not going to keep your paper. If you are able to get it in like smaller quantities closer to what your actual project needs, still provide 10 to 15 extra sheets because I do run a couple setup sheets. You have to account for the fact that even though everything is exactly as it should be, it's probably still going to mess up a few sheets. I'd want to be able to run more for a reprint if I needed to. And I would hate to have to delay your project because we ran out of paper or we just didn't have enough paper for your project. So more is better than less in this instance. All right. Now kind of into like what else this thing can do. We love seeing all of the colorful papers and all of the pretty cute designs. And I'll just kind of go back to the like concept of your die line being like the essence of your art. In this case, like this is very obviously a pear shape. Um, and it's a pretty simple shape. But when we look at our crocodile here, or nope, this is an alligator. This was a Florida wedding, so that's definitely an alligator. So our alligator name tag, um, we see a lot of detail in the alligator, but we notice that our die line does not come all the way into the neck or all the way up to the belly or even over into the tail here. It is just like accenting the art. That is the ideal die line for things that are complicated like this. Um, can we die cut things that detailed? Yes, but then you really have to be mindful of rounding your corners, making sure that there aren't any really harsh, sharp edges, um, because then we'll like have to like really keep an eye on edges tearing and paper tearing. This is actually a duplexed piece, this little alligator. So I mean, we can do it. It can be done. We know that we're gonna make it work, and if we can't make it work, we're gonna let you know. If we have any questions, like if we're like suspicious of your die line, we're gonna let you know. And if you're able to edit it, that's great. If you would like us to edit it, that is also cool. But just to let you know, like we will not run your art if we think it won't look good. We're going to go to you and we're going to ask, hey, could you like tweak just this corner? Or hey, could you simplify just a little bit? Or oh, like we don't know if it's aligned right. Like we're going to ask you. But this is just, it's we call these our like name tag zoos because it's a lot of animal shapes. We do a lot of fun things. Yeah, this is just an example of some of the art that we've cut out. I would like to have a take a moment to give a special thanks to these featured designers who allowed us to showcase their art for this presentation. Um, Victoria Delatorre, Caitlin Sedlier, Emily Baird, Casa Felix, Victoria Lane, and Curious Fox Press. That is how you can reach them online. And I would say now that that is just about the conclusion of my presentation, but Matt knows there's more coming
Maybe, yeah.
soon.
Raquel, thank you. That was fantastic. I in the beginning, Raquel kind of talked a little bit about traditional die cutting, and some of you may know this, but we bought a traditional die cutter, but we really bought it for foil stamping, and also we can do embossing, debossing, oil embossing. It does a lot of things, and we are almost done learning how to use it. Yesterday, we did our first actual live job for foil stamping. Um, you know, this is all new to us to have a machine. This is not digital. As you can tell, it's very ugly color scheme. Um, and this is a little bit of an older machine. However, there is a digital aspect to it, so it has a lot of advantages over a traditional old school die cutter or foil stamper. We can control a lot of things electronically, which is amazing. This machine, it's fast, a lot faster than the digital flatbed. However, more expensive if you're going to do a short run because we have to make a die or have a die made. I will say this machine runs, it can run up to 5,000 sheets an hour, but let's say 15 or 4,500 sheets an hour is probably our max speed. We do a lot of greeting cards. This is going to be really, really good for foil stamping greeting cards. I was talking to one of my buddies at a different shop that does foil stamping and die cutting, and they use older machines. They use windmills and things like that, Kluges. The ones he has, their max speed is 1,500 sheets an hour. This one is 3 times faster. Um, and we're really, really excited about it because it really opens the door to a lot of other projects that we haven't been able to do here in the past. A lot of these things we've used other vendors, our friends in the trade that have helped us out with bigger foil stamp jobs or foil stamping that doesn't work with our digital foil stamping, which is a whole other thing that we've talked about. In this machine, it doesn't matter what the paper is. You can foil stamp any texture. You can foil stamp any paper. You can foil stamp over ink. There's just very few limitations. But it also does die cutting, and that's how we did in the sample pack. I believe you have two different round things, round coasters. One is full color and one is foil stamp. So this was our test. The foil stamp one is what we use for training. So if they're not perfect, it's because we were learning. But you'll notice that the die cut itself is really smooth on both sides of it. But if you compare that to the one that was done digitally, this is the one with the full color. You'll notice that the digital one has a little lip on the bottom. That's just the difference between traditional die cutting and digital die cutting. Raquel keeps mentioning the belt on the digital die cutter, and that's made out of, I think it's wool. There's a vacuum that sucks it down, but it's a soft belt. And since it's soft, that it has to be soft to operate the way it does. But since it's soft, it leaves a little lip underneath. Most of the time it's not really a problem, especially because a lot of the short run digital die cutting jobs, it just wouldn't be economically feasible to create a traditional die. So I still think there's a massive, massive advantage to having the digital die cutter and utilizing it, especially for short runs. But now that we have this other machine, we'll be able to do larger runs along with foil stamping, along with debossing, embossing, and lots of other fun things. So we'll talk about this more later, and this will probably be our next IndigoEdge series, maybe. But I wanted to let everybody know this is a thing now, and we're doing a lot of learning here, and it's looking really good. We're all excited every time a new thing comes off this machine. We're like running around the shop showing everybody, like, look what we can do here. This is amazing. So we're excited.
And Matt, I wanted to also interject on the sample that you guys have, the digital die cut coaster. In your sample pack, you also have a traditional die cut and foil stamped coaster. And I just wanted to point out that you will probably notice that the traditional die cut is much smoother on the edges than the digital die cut. So that is a compromise on the digital process. So if you need those smooth edges, then we would recommend that you go with the traditional process, even if it does cost more if you're doing a short run. So I just wanted to point that out, that's not accidental, that is part of the process. And so we have a couple more questions that came in for die cutting, digital die cutting that Raquel was going over. Can you give us an idea on cost? For example, 15 pear-shaped table numbers.
15 table numbers?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Here's the thing about die cutting and the cost of die cutting. It's per sheet. So if you have table numbers, and let's say they're like 8x4, right? Like really thin, skinny things. And 8x4, you can maybe fit 3 or 4 of them up on a 12x18 sheet. And you only need 15, you only need like 5 sheets. So it's going to be relatively inexpensive. If those 15 signs were like 13x8 and it's 1-up, you need 15 sheets. It's going to cost like 3 times as much because you're using way more sheets. So that's like the cost. I think Richardson could just speak more on like actual numbers.
Yeah.
And you'll get
right
custom.
now.
We do custom quotes for like everything because it depends on your paper and if it was duplex, then if it was CMYK or if it was black ink or white ink or foiled, because we can also digitally die cut on things that are foiled. I noticed that it kind of like pinches at the foil when you have to cut through the foil, but like everything here is like super custom and bespoke and artisan and all those fancy pretty words. So it's hard to speak specifically to the cost, but we do charge it out by sheet. So the more you can fit on a sheet, the more cost effective it can be for you.
Yeah. And I can at least give you a ballpark on that pricing. There's a setup cost because we do spend a bit of time working on the file and even setting up the machine, even though it's digital. So factor $40 for setup, and then approximately $3 a sheet, depending on the intricacy. Some projects are way more intricate than others, and that's a little bit more per sheet. I want to say it's $3.50 or $4 a sheet, and really that just is covering. We have to change the blade more often because certain designs are going to have more cutting and more turns, and that just dulls the blade a lot faster. So we go through more blades, and these are not like X-Acto blades. They're really precision machined blades. They're super tiny and they're really expensive for what they are. However, that just gets rolled into the cost of a more intricate piece. But contrast that with traditional die cutting, where the die itself can be, who knows, call it 125 bucks, and then the setup on the machine, because it does take a lot longer on a traditional machine. Let's say that's $100, so you're $225 into it before you've even done one die cut. Whereas on the digital machine, you could be 60, 70 bucks for your whole job.
And then there's another question that came in. Do you provide laser cutting too, for example, intricate designs?
No.
We don't.
I
Yeah,
thought
we
about
don't do it
mentioning
here.
laser die cutting because it exists, but no, we don't offer laser
Yeah,
die cutting.
we
We
we have a
we don't
vendor
like
who does it.
we have
Sorry. Yeah, we
good.
we have a vendor. There's a little lag here. We have a vendor who does it, and we've had mixed results. The laser die cutter is super cool because you really can get super intricate die cuts. But the reason why we don't suggest it is because we typically have problems with burning. The smoke from doing the laser die cut burns the edges of the paper, or it just kind of gets on the paper. As much as the vendor has tried, and they do a great job. And a lot of it has to do with getting that smoke out of the machine. There's a smoke extractor that pulls the smoke out. We still have had issues, and you all probably know we're pretty picky when it comes to quality, and if we can't do like an absolutely fantastic job, we're just not super comfortable with offering it. So yeah, it can be done. We have a vendor, but we're always really nervous if it's a laser die cut. Although that all being said, every job's different. If it's a black paper, laser die cutting is going to be fine because nobody's going to notice if the edges are a little crispy. But if it's like a white cotton paper, we're almost certainly going to have trouble.
And then another question about what kinds of digital printing we do.
Yeah,
Do we use
good
HP
question.
Indigos? We do. Our name is actually coincidence. We actually started our company and named our company long before we even knew what an HP Indigo press was.
Yeah, yeah, that was a really lucky thing for us because, I'll be honest, like back in the day when we started 20 years ago, we had an advertisement in the Yellow Pages, if anybody remembers what that is. And somebody calls us up and says, "Hey, your name's Indigo Ink. That must mean you have an indigo." And I answered, and I said, "What's an indigo?" So of course, I know I'm dating myself. I looked it up and figured it out, and we eventually the stars aligned, and we also decided that since it was the best machine on the market, we ended up buying an Indigo. And we were totally worried that HP would be a little, HP makes the Indigo. We were worried that they would not find the coincidence as funny and fun as we did, but they never had a problem with it. But the other thing that's been really good for us and just fortunate is a lot of designers know that HP Indigos are really good, so they search for printers with HP Indigos. And because our name is Indigo Ink, when people search for that, our company comes up generally on the first page of Google. And I think it's helped us a lot. And we did not know how fortuitous that decision was going to be 20 years later. So, yep, that's the answer.
We have it, and I would encourage you to watch our first two installments if you really want to see what it can do. Because Alex, he's the one who spoke on it for both of
Yeah.
them, and he talks about the metallic ink and the white ink and the sleeking process that we're able to achieve, and like all different kinds of really fun magical things that this machine does. So yeah, like I said, metallic ink. I think we've been playing around with like UV ink and all kinds of really crazy stuff.
Yep, black light, UV ink, all kinds of crazy things. We're doing crazy things here, people. We'll let you
Yeah.
know when we're ready to share.
So after this webinar, everyone who signed up will get an email with a link to the recording of this webinar, and which is will be up on our YouTube page. And you can go to that YouTube page to look up any of the past recordings in case you want to watch those as well.
You
So
can
look
also
out
see
for
a
that.
tour. Yeah, you can also
Yeah,
see a tour
we
of the
have
shop.
we have lots of other videos which you're welcome to look at, including a shop.
Although I think it's
So
time
we're
to update the tour. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little old. We are past the hour, so we should wrap it up now.
Yeah.
Can I show the video of the machine?
Please show the video. This is a video we took of the new die cutter / foil stamper when we were testing it, and we flew down to Florida. Liz and I did, and this is a newer model. It's a little prettier. I like the colors, but this is the same idea. So this is feeding, and we are foil stamping a greeting card. This was a test job that we brought down there, and you can see how fast it is. And there they are coming out of the end. And like I mentioned, we do a lot of greeting cards, and that was one of the reasons why we bought this machine, because greeting cards are generally in the couple thousand to many thousands. But this has opened up the door to us for so many things that we didn't even think about. So I'm super excited about this machine, and I'm really excited to talk about it more in the next Edge series. But until then, keep an eye on our socials, and if you come in, we're probably going to drag you back here and show you the machine because we're so excited. It was like Christmas morning when it came in. So there'll be more information. However, if you have questions, just reach out to us. Reach out to a project manager. You can call us. We're happy to talk about it. And likewise, if you have questions about digital die cutting, call and ask. We're here to help. And thank you guys all for coming. It's past 1 o'clock. We appreciate your time, and we'll see you next time.